Hi guys, welcome to this edition of ArmCareIQ. Today we're going to talk about a pretty serious problem in baseball, especially this year in 2021. There's been a lot of adductor injuries, so I'm referring to the groin in pitching. And I'm going to kind of walk through some biomechanical elements that are related to this injury, some training, and hopefully that we can keep our athletes healthy from this particular injury. If you like what you're listening to, please subscribe to us on YouTube. Please like us. And we also have a newsletter. We have a link in the YouTube description. And on that newsletter, we come up with some great deals as far as our equipment. And we have some deeper insights into our ArmCareIQ and links to our podcast and other bits of information. So here we go. So let's just talk a little bit about the functional anatomy of the adductors and basically, how where they're located. Like you can see that they are on the underside of the pelvis. So the pubis bones and the ischial bones. So it's basically the hoop under the pelvis is where they originate. And a lot of these guys, they attach to the femur. And there's three major adductor muscles that we don't have to get into that type of detail. But what we need to know is that these adductor muscles are the muscles that bring the leg into the midline. So you can see on the video on the left, the leg is being pulled in. So it's stretched, obviously. This muscle's stretched when the leg is moving away. And this is open chain. And then on the right, the other video shows that the adductors are also involved in circumduction, which is rotation of the thigh. It basically brings it back in. It's rotating it back in. So it works when the hip is flexed, when it's extended. And, the actions here are both frontal. So if we're seeing the front of the body, and transverse plane, if I'm looking down on the body, just as we have here. Okay. So what people might not know, and I think it's interesting, is that the adductors can also work as a hip flexor and extensor. So when the hip is in deep hip flexion, especially with a straight leg, the adductors can work in terms of bringing the leg behind the pelvis into extension. And, that can happen during pitching because, you get to a point where your drive leg, being your straight leg, gets straightened. And you're getting into hip extension with a straightened leg, that muscle could be contributing there. And then the other thing is that if the hip is in extension, so that the leg is straightened, it acts as a flexor of the hip. So you can see in the pitching delivery, when a pitcher is driving down the mound, that knee is being straightened out, and there is some hip extension that is involving the adductor. And so that's where we could run into problems about, creating tension on the adductor. Okay. And most of these injuries are happening in an eccentric state where that adductor is being stretched. So we'll talk a little bit about the biomechanical derivatives. So I'm just going to show a couple videos, get these guys going. They're both slow motion. But one of the things I looked at is I wanted to know, do pitchers that are more externally rotated in the hip when they deliver, are they less exposed or more exposed to potential risk of adductor strains? And what you can see, we got two pitchers here. All the pitchers that I'm showing in this particular ArmCareIQ have had adductor strains this season, 2021. And you can see just in the top two videos, the pitcher on the right has more of an externally rotated hip. So he's like, as his knee is descending, the knees are out externally rotated. It's like he's in a saddle, like he's riding a horse. The foot turns out and he's more externally rotated before the knee turns down to foot contact. But you can see the pitcher on the left, the Yankee pitcher, you can see that the foot is more internally rotated. You can see that knee is pinched in a lot longer, and the batter would be seeing more of the cleats of the lead foot. So they're more internally rotated And then, what I believe is that potentially these internally rotated guys might whip their knee open and create more pull on the backside. However, there really isn't a real clean determination of, the hip architecture that we can just basically see in video and these injuries. But you can really take a look at these pictures, and the two guys at the bottom, you're seeing that in pictures, there's a lot of knee to knee separation. So this internal distance between the two knees while they're striding down the mound, and the knee is getting almost into full extension at the backside. There's a lot of stretch, on that adductor that they're experiencing. So, athletes that I believe potentially, it's not that they don't have flexibility. They do, because they're pitching like this all the time. What I believe is one of the main contributors to this injury for the adductor is weakness. And we're going to get into training exercises in a little bit. So I just wanted you to basically look at the pitching delivery in slow motion. And the whole goal of this is to create impulse. These guys, when they're going into their descent, they're creating a very stable knee angle. So when we see this pitcher go through, that knee angle doesn't change for a while when they're sitting in. And they're developing ground reaction force to stabilize themselves while they're rotating forward. They have to create the appropriate direction of force that becomes more horizontal. So what you're going to see is that as he's descending, okay, the knees gets into a fixed position, the hip starts flexing some more, and then they start rolling down before the knee turns down in the video. And when I break it up, you're going to see kind of the different phases as we're talking about, but these athletes need to generate impulse. They need to increase the force multiplied by time component to increase the kinetic energy into foot contact. That's a really important feature, because if we can put more energy into foot contact, it gets transferred up the chain. You got more energy, more moving energy to be transferred up the chain. So, let's look at the series of events. So this is what I want people to be able to identify, is that the ankle goes into inversion as you're traveling down the mound. Your pinky toe doesn't just flip up. Your shin is falling down the mound, and that's creating more of an inverted ankle position as you're going down into your pitching delivery. On the same token, what's happening is you're plantar flexing. So that means I'm putting more pressure on my toes, and my ankle's basically extending. I'm toeing down as I'm pushing off the ground. And then what also is happening in the third component is the foot is externally rotating. So the shin, because you're in closed chain, is starting to rotate internally towards the plate for the drive leg. And the foot is doing this inversion, external rotation, plantar flexion, and the pitchers are trying to hold on to that, create friction as long as possible. And what happens is when you get to this point where you're really, you're getting to more of an extended knee, there's this brief instant that I believe is this corkscrew of the foot, because you're creating this friction. And then this knee extension, this rapid knee extension at the end while the adductor is lengthened, and then we get a strain. So it's like this, I believe there's some type of corkscrew extension mechanism of this injury, because these athletes, good pitchers, they want to stay in contact with the ground a long time, so that they create their angle, and that they can create enough kinetic energy going into foot contact. So I know that's a lot, but there is a mechanism, I believe, with the ankle related to the groin. And then it just gets moderated through high-speed knee extension on the backside. So, we talked about, improving impulses and improving kinetic energy. But the one thing that I wanted to show, so, I'm a research associate at Louisiana Tech, and I'm showing my data from my previous research, but I want to show you what you can do, especially at the college level and pro level, in terms of evaluating ground reaction forces, is to have them actually embedded in a mound. And you can look at all three directions. We're going to get into that in a little bit as well. But what I want to show with this graph is I showed athletes that had varying levels of stride length and how much force they can produce. And what you can see in a lot of pictures, you might not see a lot of differences in the vertical ground reaction force. So this is the top left box here, where you can see the vertical reaction force, the differences between shortened stride and longer stride I've shown in red. So there's slight differences, okay? And in impulse, it's very minimal as far as the force times time in the vertical direction. So how long the athlete applies force in the vertical direction isn't that much different from pitchers. And it's interesting because this is similar in sprinters. And I think I've mentioned it before, that one of the big differentiators in sprinting is being able to apply more horizontal force. So it's on an angle with the ground rather than vertical. So even when these guys are upright at max speed, they're still applying some direction that's horizontal, and that's allowing them to continue to accelerate. And I believe the same concept is with pitchers. And so you can see when I go to the anterior posterior shear, and that's basically if I'm pushing back on the mount, I got this corkscrew extension mechanism with my drive leg. As I'm pushing back and away, you know, I'm creating an anterior force from pushing posterior, from pushing behind me. And you can see if you know you're looking at the gaps between the lines, you know, first looking at the forces, you can see there's a big distance. You know, this looks like it's a big differentiator in athletes, the way that they stride, as far as the force that they can produce. So that is huge. And the other thing is when you look at impulse, it's also quite large. You can see there's a big red area that you didn't see with the vertical. So the force times time, the time application of the force is greater in pitchers that have a longer stride. And it's important to see, you know, in future, evaluating these impulses related to velocity development. You know, take a while to evaluate health, but what I think is, you know, these athletes are really relying on this corkscrew extension and creating these high horizontal force inputs, and to be able to last a long time in applying them on the ground before the heel picks up. So that's something I wanted to show you guys to make sense of why this is an important mechanism. So I'll play a video. You know, if you want to see ground reaction forces in action, you can see on the video, you can see it moving around. You can see when the athlete is going into sitting in that leg. So they're going into hip hinge and knee flexion on the drive leg as they're rolling that knee down towards the ground to create angle. You can see to decelerate that body from, you know, going down to the ground, there's this high spike in force. And that's your eccentric force. That's pretty high, you know, because you're loading and, you know, you have to stop yourself from falling through the floor. And then that eccentric force gets redirected from loading to exploding. And I just have a picture, you know, highlighting the skeleton here that you can see the angle that it's creating. You know, that's the resultant angle. And I believe that the resultant angle of force differs for differing pitchers, and potentially the ones that have much more of a horizontal steep force, they may be exposing their adductors to greater risk. It needs to be further evaluated. But, you know, our goal is to create that direction. You know, when we train, we want to create that direction, and it can increase the load on the adductors. And so, you know, if you're evaluating this in your pitchers, you might think, hey, this guy's got a pretty sharp resultant vector, and I need to do a little bit more with their groin, because you just don't want to have a groin injury in pitchers. Lower body injuries for pitchers shouldn't happen. You know, that could be training error for sure, and lack of monitoring. But, you know, just to give you a description of the 3D forces. So FZ in this picture with the axes, FZ is the vertical force. Fy is that anterior posterior force, and it's just showing the positive directions. Obviously, if my arrows were flipped the other way, my arrow's going down, that's negative. If my arrow's going back on the Fy, that's a negative. That's a posterior directed force, ground reaction force. And the Fx is basically the medial lateral, how much the foot is playing, you know, off to the side. And again, we talked about this corkscrew mechanism, and this there's a rotary force when you're creating the combination of all of these forces, the rotation of all these forces around a vertical axis. is called the free moment, but we can call that ground reaction torque. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, is that athletes are trying to create this frictional related force while they're on the mound with their cleats. Obviously, some athletes don't produce a great one because they hook the rubber. Some guys, every athlete's different, every pitcher's different. Some of them want to hook the rubber. That means they're getting on top of the rubber and trying to grip it with some inside cleats, but it can cause them to get into eversion, flipping up the pinky toe early. And they may they're trying to create a pulling force, which could also increase the risk of hip adductor strains, but they're not getting as much push as you think they are because they're losing contact with the ground. It's a hard surface. There's no friction. We're not getting a lot of that free moment rotation. So, that's, some of the interactions there. So, what can we do to train it? I want to bring up a hip extended position is one way, that we want to be able to improve the strength of the adductors. There's lots of different ways that you can use a stability ball. But this one, I'm basically lying down. I want my back, my lower back into the ground so that I'm in a good position. And I'm just squeezing, you're going to see. And there's a little bit of perturbation because I'm fighting between my legs. Okay, I'm trying to pack my neck in, really good spine alignment. And I'm doing these squeezes. And they're highly isometric, and they promote strength. We need strength in a hip extended position. We also have some where they're in a pseudo extended position that you're now more vertical. There's a little bit more core component to stabilize, changes a little bit of the muscle actions. On the left, there's one where I'm actually doing an isometric squeeze. On the others, I'm trying to create some speed into my isometrics. So there's a little bit more perturbation, and they're a little tougher. Okay, so it's a good way to kind of get your groin going as well. First couple reps, don't hit it real quick right away. I would always go the isometrics before the pulses, the held before the pulses, just to ensure that your groin is good and ready. Okay, now you can do hip flexion. You can make it a little bit easier and work the groin as well in a hip flex position. You don't need to spend a ton of time there because these groin injuries aren't happening with the hip flexed at 90 degrees. They're happening more with the hip extended. So you can basically take a look at those. Similar concept. I'm squeezing. The other one's got a bit of a pulse, going back and forth. So that's the shortened position. Okay, this is the one I like as we get into the eccentrics. And you can use a chair, you can use a bench. I use the short lever. Some people do the long lever. I particularly get some knee issues when I go with my legs straight out, extended. So basically, I'm in a hip extended position or neutral hip. And I'm going short lever. So it's like knee to knee actions. And obviously I put a pad down. It's uncomfortable if you're on a hard surface to bank your lead leg, but I'm in a plank position. I'm packing my shoulder. I'm making sure my shoulder blade and my shoulder are in the right position, not dumping my shoulder forward. I'm pushing my hand into the ground really hard, creating a stable base, trying to keep a neutral head, and breathing. Obviously, I don't want to be Valsalva in this particular action, but what you can see is that I'm doing eccentric. I'm teaching my muscle to lengthen while I'm creating tension. Okay, and I also have kind of the mindset that I want to get up there fast, so I'm trying to create a little bit of power at that muscle, and it's really hard, and these are alternatives. Like, you might have a 4-way hip machine. That's a sophisticated machine that can train hip adduction. Some people do the seated hip adduction equipment, but I really think that keeping the hip in a more of an extended position is going to create a little bit more length and tension on the adductor as you're training it. So I like these negatives. So this is the last of our 1-month offer, and the one thing that you might not know is that research has shown that these adductor injuries are related to arm injuries. They're related to UCL injuries. There's a little bit more risk with UCL sprains based on previous injury, and they even have more post injuries. UCL guys have shown more post injuries to their adductors. So there is a connection there. And what I think is the reason is that during the buildup, so when an athlete actually sustains an adductor injury, they obviously have to be built back up going back into competition. And there's some mistakes there. It's possible that strength hasn't been monitored during the buildup phase in rehabilitating a lower body injury, such as an adductor injury. And so, our product is a product that's going to evaluate strength during the rehabilitation process. And if you're taking strength measures before an injury, regardless of what it is, during the rehabilitation, you're going to be able to match it and know where my arm strength for this athlete needs to be. Is it low? And it gives you a better chance for the athlete not to have a subsequent arm injury. And I think that is hugely important for any level. You don't want to have an athlete have a lower body injury, a pitcher for sure, but you don't want it to lead into a secondary surgery for the throwing arm. So what we do, obviously we focus, strength matters most, and we really focus on the distal chain. We really worry about, hey, what's arm strength looking like? We also evaluate range of motion, what's going on there. So, in a performance program, we always want to make sure that we've maximized those things, and we're offering a discount so that, everybody can feel protected by our product. I really thank you for listening, and until next time.